Salutations, respected viewers. I am George from Ireland, and this video is about more of the differences between American English and British English. Not talking about the spellings, because otherwise I'd actually have to spell it out, so I shan't bother. I can't remember how this one came to my mind a few days ago, but cane in the United States, that's something that an elderly person or someone with a lame leg would be using to support himself or herself. A gammy leg, we might say in British slang, though I haven't heard that one for a long time. A dicky leg as well. I haven't heard that one for ages. In the United Kingdom, that would be a walking stick, right? In the United Kingdom, and indeed the Republic of Ireland, a cane is for caning people with, for whacking a person's backside as a punishment. I'm not sure people say backside in the United States ever. The person's bottom, but we don't do that very much. We almost never say birch. I know Gore Vidal said the birch ought to be permitted, but only between consenting adults. All right, parentheses. There are always brackets in the British Isles. Now, period is a punctuation mark. In the United States, in the United Kingdom, it means menstruation. I realise it can mean that in America too. When you say full stop, say for like, there'll be no compromise, period. You might say, if you're in the United States, whereas a Britisher would say, there'll be no compromise, full stop. That's it. Maybe go back to the days of telegrams when they had no punctuation and they just used to write the word stop at the end of a sentence. But I think full stop was around before that, as opposed to a comma or a colon or something like that. Talking about in legalese, I watch these American courtroom dramas just occasionally, ask for a continuance. I suppose we might say an adjournment, whatever, when the court case is not going to be, well, not adjourned for a matter of minutes, but they will be postponed days or weeks. We don't have lawyers leaping to their feet shouting objection. I know in the United States a judge is addressed as Your Honour, whereas in Ireland, well, not actually, we don't do that in Ireland. Only Northern Ireland they say my lord, but to Great Britain they certainly say my lord for a judge. What if the judge is a woman? Good question. I think it's actually still my lord. It gets a bit complicated into other titles of judges because they have Justice before their name, Mr. Justice Anderson or whoever, or Miss Justice Matheson or whatever. So Justice is not actually the name; they just put it in as a bit of their title. Okay. Oh, so attorney. People say that in the United States. In the British Isles, people rarely say attorney. There's the Attorney General, who's the government's lawyer, but there's a divided legal profession. There are barristers and there are solicitors. There are 10 times as many solicitors as there are barristers. We shan't go into the difference too much. I know in the United States this doesn't exist, that there is a Solicitor General. A solicitor is supposed to be very solicitous towards his or her clients. Such a thing as the Queen's Counsel, and very distinguished and successful barristers, perhaps a fifth of them are Queen's Counsels. Counsel in this spelled C-O-U-N-S-E-L, as in like advisor. I know we talk about the lawyers as counsel sometimes. Obviously, when the Queen dies, if there's a king, if King Charles becomes king, or Prince Charles becomes king, it'll be King's Counsel. And the Queen's Counsel puts QC after his or her name. If they're King's Counsels, because there's a king on the throne, it'll be KC, and so on. In the Republic of Ireland, it's SC, Senior Counsel. There's only a minority of people ever get to be Queen's Counsel. A few solicitors get to be Queen's Counsels, very few. Other things that exist in the United States don't exist in the British Isles, where there's an associate's degree. There's something a bit like that, one down from a bachelor's degree in the United Kingdom, where there was HND, Higher National Diploma, but some people contemptuously said HND stands for have no degree, or GNVQ, General National Vocational Qualification, but some wit said it stands for generally not very qualified. But that's no associate's degree in the British Isles. Surgeons. What is a surgeon addressed as in the British Isles? His title is Mr., or if it's a woman, Miss. Why? Well, it goes back to the days when they were barber surgeons. They really were barbers, or just other very strong men, butchers, literally and figuratively, who could sever a limb in a single blow, ideally, or do it very quickly to saw through a thigh bone or something. So they were not people with any medical training. and have a few porters, they were called, to hold the person down, treat them with laudanum or alcohol or something, try and staunch the pain and the flow of blood. But anyway, so that's why obviously surgeons have nothing to do with that these days. A surgeon, he or she will have been to university. We tend not to call it medical school as you're talking about particularly the medical department of university. Anyway, qualify as a doctor in an ordinary way and follow the career path and blah, blah, blah. And quite a few years later, qualify as a surgeon. So he or she will have held the title doctor, as in a physician, but then be demoted to Mr. in the title, which is an allusion to the time when they were not physicians at all who were performing surgery. But obviously since the 19th century, that's completely changed. So it's an inverted snobbery as well. We tend not to say OBGYN, just an obstetrician or a gynecologist. But I don't know in the United States, is that a combined speciality? I mean, in the British Isles, there tend to be two separate specialisms. I realise they're obviously related. Now, we tend not to say family doctor. We say GP, general practitioner, or doctor's office. We'd almost invariably say the doctor's clinic. Well, to do with spellings, for example, paediatrician is P-A-E-D, and so on for us in paediatrician. I said I wouldn't do spellings, sorry. Or anaesthetist. Now, there's also anesthesiologist. Is that the American one? I can't remember. But the same thing, giving people anesthetics. Edema, well, it's a swelling. That's Greek. You may have heard of Oedipus with his swollen foot. That's why it's called Oedipus. But for us, okay, it's just the same, but there's an O on the front, O-E-D-E-M-A. But we pronounce it edema the same. If you're a doctor, don't tell your British patient that he is going to get a shot. What? With a gun? No. For us, we'd say injection. We never say shots. There we are. A drugstore. Well, I think, what, are you actually selling drugs? Is that legal in this state? Which ones are you selling? We'd of course say pharmacy, and a pharmacist works there, and the subject that he or she is qualified in is also called pharmacy. Is not pharmacology. I don't quite understand the difference. Sometimes we call it a chemist's or a chemist's shop. Now, it's a little bit confusing because obviously there's a subject chemistry at school, and there are some industrial chemists who work at factories or in oil refineries, as opposed to a chemist, and he or she is selling medicines over the counter with a prescription. Like a school is headed by a head in the British Isles for the most part. Headmaster is a man, headmistress if it's a woman. You might say head teacher if you want to be gender neutral, and then just head could be generic. What else? Whereas I know in the United States it's principal. That's another thing. We tend to do the name or the title, not both together. Like I think of The Simpsons, Principal Skinner. We would call him the principal or else Mr. Skinner, but not the both together. Or if you could address him as principal, and that's it, not adding a surname. Or indeed, like headmasters I've known, I would say headmaster to him, and not say headmaster, then the surname, Headmaster Turner or whatever. So with most titles, it's like that. The military ranks, they quite often say the rank and then the surname. Surname, that's last name, by the way. Lieutenant, this American rank, lieutenant. In the United Kingdom, it's pronounced lieutenant. There's no F in it. You're thinking, what? But it's still pronounced lieutenant. I wonder about the etymology. Is it because a lieutenant was left in charge of a place, like a tenant in charge of something like that? I don't know. Ordinary police officers are police constables. I'm not quite sure why. The person in charge of a castle was a constable, but maybe it's because this lord owns several castles and he's not there, so the constable, the person he's putting in charge. How did that turn into the lowest rank in the police? Then there are chief constables and so on. We don't have captain as a police rank. It's in the army or the navy or things like that. The thing is, every county in the United Kingdom's got a Lord Lieutenant in charge of it. I think it is pronounced Lord Lieutenant in relation to a county, not Lord Lieutenant. Like in Ireland, we had a Lord Lieutenant as well. And that's an honorary position. I won't go into it. They're often held by very upper-class people. It's not a political position. It's not an elected position. Well, coming back to counsellor. We have counsellor, C-O-U-N-S-E-L-L-O-R, as in someone who advises, who gives you counsel. Could be legal counsel, or we don't call it counsellor for legal counsel, like giving you psychotherapy or whatever, or counselling about addiction. But there's also counsellor, C-O-U-N-C-I-L-O-R, as in someone who's elected to the council. Each county has got a county council, or sometimes there's an urban district council, or a rural district council, or a city council, things like that. So they're politicians, they're low-level local politicians or councillors, usually not doing it as a full-time job. They're doing this several hours a week on top of whatever their other job is. So what else about these councillors? I'm not sure what they call them in the United States. I mean, I know you have the mayor of small cities. Well, mayor is different. Board of supervisors, something like that. People who are going to City Hall, not just the mayor, but people who are elected to represent precincts, something like that. This is another funny one. Okay, but this is anachronistic, really, using the word succor, S-U-C-C-O-U-R, as in help. This is a biblical word. If you're keen on the King James Bible, 1604, when they began translating it, you'd use the word succor. Like in French, au secours, calling for help. And but obviously in the United States, succor, S-U-C-E-R, means a gullible person, the mark in some fraud. So someone who can easily be gulled. He or she has been hoodwinked out of money. And there was a church in England in the early 20th century that a wealthy American became very sympathetic towards, and he used to send them money, and he visited this church in England, and that was that. So the priest was delighted that this affluent American chap was helping out the parish financially. So in one of his prayers, the priest said, "O Lord, we thank you for this succor from across the sea," meaning we thank you for this help. It was like manna from heaven. But of course, the American chap thought they're suggesting that he was foolish because they had easily persuaded him to part with his money. There we are. So those are my uncollected thoughts, some just some sort of random reflections on distinctions between the two codes. If you don't quite hear someone, Americans tend to say, "What's that?" but it comes across as a trifle abrasive to people in the British Isles, or saying pardon or pardon me if you didn't hear things. People sometimes say that in the British Isles as well. If you're more pucker in Great Britain or Ireland, you might say sorry. But I heard that some really posh people maybe long ago used to say what, which again comes across as brusque, but perhaps they're so self-assured and they're so haughty, they feel they can speak like that. All right, this is something which could go on endlessly, but I'm getting faintly bored of the topic.